All right, welcome to today's Tier 1 Global Issues Briefing. Today is August 23rd, 2026, and wow, we have got a massive amount of ground to cover. In this explainer, we're skipping the noise, looking straight at the hard data, and really analyzing the structural impacts of the events reshaping our world right now. So, let's get right into it.
On the agenda today, 1. The U.S.-Canada trade war. 2. The U.S.-Iran Middle East escalation. 3. The DRC, Ebola crisis. And 4. Today's overall conclusion.
Section 1. The U.S.-Canada trade war. To break this down, we'll go through our standard 5 steps: overview, background, status, impact, and outlook.
Okay, 50%. That headline number is massive. Just yesterday, the U.S. suddenly slapped a 50% Section 338 tariff on $20 billion worth of Canadian goods after trade talks completely collapsed. We're talking about everything from steel and lumber to wine and, yes, even hockey sticks. The trigger for all this? Well, it's been an year of what Washington describes as retaliatory measures and unequal treatment by Canada, which basically culminated in these failed 11th-hour negotiations.
What's really fascinating here is the framing war between the two nations, and we need to look objectively at both sides' rhetoric. U.S. President Donald Trump views this as correcting a fundamental imbalance. He's arguing that Canada basically wants the economic benefits of being a U.S. state without actually being one. So Washington is demanding a total overhaul of Canadian dairy protections and auto quotas. But across the border, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney frames this as a direct attack on sovereignty. He's stating that economic integration has literally been weaponized. Canada has outright rejected the U.S. demands and is actively preparing countermeasures.
So what's the actual economic fallout? It's really twofold. In the short term, consumers are going to feel immediate pain at the border with price hikes on everyday goods. Plus, we've already seen a $5.6 billion drop in U.S. auto exports to Canada between April 2025 and March 2026. But honestly, the long-term structural impact is far more severe. This escalation directly threatens the USMCA framework, which governs roughly $2 trillion annually in North American trade. If this persists, we are looking at a permanent realignment of continental supply chains.
Where does this actually leave us? We're looking at two primary paths. Scenario A sees some sort of diplomatic resolution reached before Canada's retaliation deadline. Scenario B sees negotiations remain completely frozen, plunging both nations into a protracted trade war. The absolutely crucial date to circle on your calendar here is September 8, 2026. That is when Prime Minister Carney's dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs on U.S. steel, dairy, and electronics officially go live. Section 2. The U.S.-Iran Middle East escalation.
Again, we'll hit the overview, background, status, impact, and outlook to separate the rhetoric from reality.
So, how exactly did we get here? Let's trace it back. After kinetic strikes on February 28th and a really tense ceasefire in April, the U.S. and Iran signed a Memorandum of Understanding on June 18th. This opened a 60-day diplomatic window to resolve their differences. But here is the trigger for today's crisis. On August 17th, that window slammed shut without a deal. The guardrails are officially off.
Let's look at the ground truth. Right now, reports show Iran holds roughly 440 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity. While that's not technically weapons grade, it is dangerously close. To add to the tension, an Iranian defense spokesperson is claiming their production of strategic defense equipment has surged threefold during the recent conflict. There are even unverified claims circulating from Iran about the preparation of 15,000 intercontinental ballistic missiles, though U.S. intelligence has previously cast heavy doubt on their ICBM timeline.
The positions right now are incredibly entrenched on all sides. The U.S., with President Trump literally claiming the Strait of Hormuz as American territory, is preparing what the Treasury Secretary calls the toughest sanctions in history, right alongside a naval blockade. Iran's counter-strategy, on the other hand, is extreme. Influential voices in Tehran are formally pushing to withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or NPT. Iran has also warned regional actors that any country joining the U.S. economic war will be considered an enemy, putting their oil routes at immediate risk.
The economic impact here scales incredibly rapidly. The short-term shock is severe volatility in global energy markets. With the Strait of Hormuz effectively contested, up to 20% of global oil and gas trade is at risk of disruption. Think about that. 20%! It's a massive choke point. But the long-term structural impact is the true danger here. A permanent geopolitical fracturing of the Middle East and a severe acceleration of global nuclear proliferation if Iran actually officially exits the NPT.
Looking ahead, we're basically waiting for one of two things to break. Scenario A, back channels reopen to stabilize the strait and prevent a wider war. Scenario B, Iran formally exits the NPT, which almost certainly triggers major kinetic escalation. The key metric to watch right now, the U.S. Treasury. We are anticipating the imminent announcement of their promised draconian sanctions, and that could very well serve as the spark for Tehran's next move.
Section 3. The DRC Ebola Crisis.
We'll run through the overview, background, status, impact, and outlook for this rapidly expanding global health emergency.
Take a look at these numbers. They are absolutely chilling. As of this month, we are looking at the deadliest Ebola outbreak in the history of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The data shows over 4,665 confirmed cases and 2,184 deaths. That represents a devastating crude case fatality rate of 46.8%. And according to the WHO, the virus is expanding faster than any previous outbreak, now spanning 54 health zones across 6 different provinces.
The medical response here is incredibly complex. The global community has deployed 70,000 doses of the Ervebo vaccine to the DRC, with 50,000 of those meant directly for frontline workers. However, there's a huge catch. This outbreak is caused by the Bundibugyo strain of the virus, but the Ervebo vaccine was developed for the Zaire strain. It is currently entirely unknown if the vaccine will provide cross-protection. Add to this the severe complications of armed conflict, massive population displacement, and literal attacks on health workers in eastern DRC, you can see why containment has become a monumental challenge.
And the economic footprint of this health crisis? It is profound. In the short term, it's a severe humanitarian disaster, causing localized economic collapse and completely halting cross-border trade. But in the long term, this threatens the deep destabilization of eastern DRC. Why does this matter globally? Because the DRC is the absolute nexus of the global critical mineral supply chain. A complete breakdown there means massive disruptions to the manufacturing of electronics, batteries, and renewable energy technologies worldwide.
Our outlook for the DRC really hinges on epidemiology. Scenario A assumes the Ervebo vaccine actually proves cross-protective in clinical trials, which would allow health workers to ring-fence and halt the spread. Scenario B is the failure of the vaccine, leading to unchecked regional spillover. The critical date to watch here is August 27, 2026. That's when neighboring Uganda's 42-day enhanced monitoring period for a previous imported case concludes. If new cases emerge there, the regional crisis has officially expanded.
Section 4. Today's overall conclusion. When we step back and synthesize all this data from today's explainer, a really stark pattern emerges. We are witnessing the simultaneous fracturing of the fundamental architectures of global stability. Think about it. In North America, the architecture of free trade is breaking down under heavy tariffs. In the Middle East, the architecture of nuclear non-proliferation and maritime security is on the verge of total collapse. And in Africa, the global health architecture is struggling to contain a deadly pathogen amidst deep geopolitical instability.
Which leads us to our final thought for the day. The international guardrails that define the early 21st century are failing concurrently. Whether it's tariffs, missiles, or a virus, the underlying theme is a system struggling to maintain order. So I leave you with this question based on today's data. As these guardrails collapse, what will be the ultimate cost of a world operating without a unified global order? Thank you for joining me for this explainer of today's events. Keep your eyes on the data.